I have always known that I am a highly sensitive person. And over the years, I have learned that balancing the dynamics of giving and receiving in relationships requires patience, self-awareness, and openness. In this journey, I have encountered moments when I gave my all, listening, understanding, and supporting those around me, only to later feel emotionally drained by interactions that lacked the reciprocity and appreciation I deeply needed. This video is a personal narrative on how I discovered the importance of setting boundaries and learning to care for my own heart while remaining compassionate toward others. I will take you through my experiences of hosting gatherings, extending heartfelt invitations to friends, and feeling disappointed when gestures of care were met with indifference, such as when a simple invitation was not honored, or when what was meant to be shared, like coffee and treats, was taken without the consideration I hoped for. The inspiration for this narrative comes not only from my own life, but also from the experiences of people like Marta and Thiron, whose stories highlighted the silent struggles of well-intentioned individuals who sometimes fail to express their feelings in the way we anticipate. As I reflect on these moments, I recognize that the human need for connection is profound, yet it must be balanced with the understanding that our emotional energy is limited and precious. Staying true to this balance means learning to appreciate our sensitivity as a strength while also protecting our well-being. In sharing my journey, I want to offer some clarity and practical insight into why we feel hurt when our efforts seem to go unnoticed, and how, by acknowledging our feelings and establishing healthy boundaries, we can move toward relationships that nourish us rather than deplete us. I vividly recall the many times I found myself in situations where I became the pillar for others, often offering a listening ear, advice, and unwavering support. In one instance, I hosted a small dinner where I meticulously planned every detail, from the decor to the menu, hoping that the evening would foster a deeper bond among us. However, I soon realized that while I was pouring my heart into every aspect of the event, my gestures were met with only lukewarm responses. I watched as some friends accepted my invitations with a seemingly indifferent attitude, later canceling last minute or arriving without a word of thanks. This left me with a lingering feeling of emptiness and a growing sense that my efforts were not reciprocated. I remember a day when I prepared a comforting cup of coffee and a slice of cake for a friend who had been going through a rough patch. Despite my intention to ease her burden, I later discovered that she had taken the treats for herself repeatedly, without acknowledging the small act of care intended for us to share. These experiences stung deeply because they underscored the overwhelming discrepancy between how much I gave and how little was returned. In reflecting on these moments, I began to question whether my willingness to give so freely was being exploited or simply misunderstood. I realized that my high sensitivity, which once felt like a beautiful gift, was also a double-edged sword that made me particularly vulnerable to feeling undervalued. The emotional toll was not just the disappointment of unmet expectations, but also the weariness of continuously striving for a connection that seemed fragile and unbalanced. This ongoing inner conflict led me to a turning point where I understood that while it is natural to desire closeness and warmth in relationships, it is equally critical to honor one's own emotional needs and recognize when the act of giving becomes self-sacrifice rather than mutual sharing. Learning to navigate relationships without compromising my emotional well-being became a necessity rather than a choice. I realized that setting boundaries did not mean shutting others out. Instead, it was about preserving my energy and communicating my needs in a thoughtful manner. I started to observe and evaluate my interactions, distinguishing between those that nurtured my spirit and those that drained me. I began to invite friends to gatherings or simple coffee meetups with clear intentions, stating in my mind that every invitation was an opportunity for mutual care. Yet over time, I recognized that not every invitation was met with reciprocal excitement or commitment. I have experienced moments when a friend would accept an invitation only if I followed up repeatedly, a clear sign that they might not genuinely value the connection as much as I did. With these insights, I decided to gently express that while I cherish the time I spend with others, I also needed to feel that my efforts were met with some acknowledgement and enthusiasm. I started saying silently to myself, the hug will come in its own time, or I deserve to feel equally appreciated. Through these reflections, I discovered that small adjustments in how I invited and engaged with others made a significant difference. Setting boundaries meant saying no when I felt overloaded, and yes when I sensed genuine warmth. It also meant clarifying that my energy was precious and that I expected a little more initiative and reciprocity on the part of others. These changes did not happen overnight, but with patience and consistency, I learned to navigate interactions in a way that allowed me to be both giving and self-protective. The contrast between those who made an effort and those who only responded when prompted became clear, and I began to focus on cultivating relationships that honored both my generosity and my need for respect. In the tapestry of my relationships, two stories stand out as powerful lessons in sensitivity and reciprocal care. Thyron's experience resonated deeply with me. His wounds ran so deep that a simple hug could not erase the pain he had endured. To him, the act of physical closeness, instead of mending his broken sense of trust, felt like an empty gesture that minimized his suffering. This left him with an internal conflict, wondering if his reluctance to embrace such gestures was born of pride or simply the exhaustion that came from continuously feeling unacknowledged. Then there was Marta, a kind soul whose actions, though well-meaning, often reflected her own inner fragility. I observed her hesitating to initiate contact or offer the warm embraces that might have bridged the emotional gaps between us. Instead, she maintained a polite distance, taking my gestures as truths too fragile to confront, which inadvertently deepened the chasm of disconnection. These intertwined stories illustrated a profound reality. Sometimes, even when people are inherently good, their inner struggles and fears can lead to actions that do not fully satisfy our emotional needs. In reflecting on Thyron and Marta's experiences, I learned that true sensitivity involves not only an ability to give, but also the courage to express one's most vulnerable feelings. It taught me that while it is essential to respect others' boundaries, it is equally important to advocate for my own emotional well-being. Their stories, woven into my own, highlighted the importance of recognizing that emotional reciprocity does not always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it manifests subtly in the form of gentle advances or a gradual opening up, and sometimes it is delayed until both parties feel safe enough to express their true selves. These lessons remain a guiding light, encouraging me to continue nurturing connections patiently, even when faced with the inevitable complexities of human relationships. I recall a particular evening that has since become a poignant reminder of the need for balance in our interactions. On that evening, I decided to host a small gathering with the hope of creating a warm, inviting space where genuine connections could flourish. I put in countless hours preparing a cozy ambiance, carefully arranging cushions, lighting a few candles, and setting out freshly brewed coffee, green tea, and a selection of delightful treats. Everything was arranged with the intention of sharing not just food and drink, but also a piece of my heart. However, as the night unfolded, I noticed subtle cues that everything was not as harmonious as I had envisioned. Some of the guests, despite enjoying the occasion, began to take more than what was politely offered. A couple in particular seemed to indulge excessively, drinking 7 cups of coffee between them and repeatedly taking additional servings of tea and treats without a single word of courtesy or even an apology. It felt as if they were so caught up in satisfying their immediate needs that the simple act of sharing and respecting the communal effort went unnoticed. In that moment, I experienced a profound internal shift. I felt not only disappointed, but also a deep sense of invalidation, as if all the effort and care I had invested in creating that welcoming environment was being casually disregarded. This incident forced me to confront the harsh reality that sometimes, no matter how warm one's intentions or how beautifully one sets the stage, the actions of others may not align with the spirit of reciprocity. The night ended with a quiet resignation on my part, a realization that while it is natural to give freely, it is equally important to establish clear guidelines for respect and mutual care. That evening became a cautionary tale, reminding me that our energy is valuable and that self-care sometimes means acknowledging when to hold back and protect our heart. From these experiences emerged a transforming realization. The path to nurturing healthy relationships is paved with self-awareness, clear boundaries, and deliberate self-care practices. I discovered that my sensitivity is not a flaw, but a strength that allows me to feel deeply and empathize with others, provided I also take the time to care for myself. One of the most significant lessons I learned was the importance of accepting compliments and small gestures of care without feeling the need to immediately reciprocate. This act of gentle acceptance affirmed my worth, teaching me that I do not always have to give until I am completely spent. I began implementing routines that allowed me to recharge emotionally. Every morning, I dedicated a few quiet minutes to mindfulness exercises where I would sit with my thoughts and allow myself to acknowledge the feelings of exhaustion or disappointment that occasionally surfaced during social interactions. I also started journaling my experiences, capturing both the moments of joy and the instances where I felt my energy being drained. With time, I became more adept at communicating my limits. I learned to say, internally, I deserve to feel valued, even before extending an invitation or offering my support. I adapted my approach to social engagements by selecting interactions that promised reciprocity. For instance, when planning a meetup, I began inviting friends who had shown genuine interest in connecting and had consistently reciprocated small acts of kindness in the past. I also developed a gentle but assertive way of addressing imbalances when they arose. If I noticed that someone repeatedly accepted my invitations without a hint of effort to initiate contact themselves, or as in some cases when a small act of hospitality was taken for granted, I made a mental note to address it later in a calm and reflective manner. This approach did not come from a place of anger or resentment, but rather from a deep understanding that protecting my own spirit was essential to maintaining long-term, healthy relationships. Over time, these self-care strategies transformed my perspective. I began to view each interaction as a choice rather than an obligation, and by prioritizing my well-being, I discovered that the quality of my relationships improved significantly. I welcomed the realization that I could still care for others while ensuring that my heart remained whole, a balance that, once achieved, brought about a sense of empowerment and lasting inner peace. As I reflect on these intertwined experiences of giving, receiving, and sometimes not receiving, I am reminded of the delicate dance we perform in our relationships. The journey that began with heartfelt hospitality, personal disappointments, and learning to set gentle boundaries has evolved into a transformative process of self-discovery and mindful connection. I invite you to pause and reflect on your own interactions, to consider whether your energy is being truly valued, and to feel confident in setting the limits that protect your well-being. Embrace your sensitivity and let it guide you to relationships that reciprocate care and warmth. Thank you for joining me on this journey of growth and understanding. Remember, each step toward honoring your worth is a powerful act of self-love that creates space for more genuine, healing connections.